Hello, everybody. Welcome to Encounter Balance. This is Jeff. Today, I just wanted to do a little audio response here to a couple things that have been happening in the community lately. One of them is the Something RPG-ish podcast that just came out recently on improvisation. I'd highly recommend you give it a listen. They have some really good advice and some really good perspectives on how you can improvise. And the other is the legend lore craze that's been happening in the AbTap group lately. I just wanted to give a little bit of my thoughts and perspective on improvisation because I think I have some background that not everybody here has that might provide some useful insight that other people might not have had a chance to get. I come from a jazz background, so I have a lot of improvisation experience with that. Improvisation was always kind of my focus in music. And I think there's some lessons that I learned from improvisation in music that can be applied to tabletop gaming that some people might not have heard. So I think the main point that I learned is that there's a big misconception that a lot of people have about improvisation, both in music and just improvisation in general, where they think improvisation, if you're going to improvise, that means that you're creating something completely brand new, just out of thin air, just on the spot, you just create something that's never been done before, and it's this incredible show of creativity. But more often than not, I find that that's simply just not the case. There's only so much storytelling, for one, that can be told, and most of it's been done already. So chances are you're not coming up with something revolutionary on the spot, no matter how hard you try. But if you look at a lot of the great improvisers in music, a lot of what they do is very obviously and clearly influenced by other great improvisers. There's a technique in jazz called transcription that you learn as a student if you study jazz. Basically, what it is you take a famous solo. Maybe you take a John Coltrane saxophone solo, and you learn how to play along with that solo. You learn all the different licks he plays, all the different patterns, all the different chord progressions and changes, and you learn to play along with it. And the goal of this is not really just to learn how to play the specific John Coltrane solo, but basically by following along with John Coltrane as he solos, you can pick up some of the thought process and the technique that he goes into improvisation with. And you can take those influences and they'll come out in your own improvisation, even if you're not playing the exact lines that John Coltrane played. And I think there's something that you can do in tabletop gaming that's very similar, where if you need to come up with an encounter or a character or a setting or something like that, just totally spur of the moment, don't be afraid to let influences from movies and video games and books come into your creation, because they're going to find a way through anyways. Our influences have a way of finding their way into our work, whether we want them to or not. It may sound a little bit strange, but just don't be afraid to steal or borrow. You don't want to copy and paste things directly, taking the exact names and places and events. But if you need an encounter, just think of an encounter in a video game that you really like. Take that and use it in your RPG. If you have a character in a movie that just really resonates with you, let that influence the next character that you play or an NPC in your world that you can create. It doesn't have to be a carbon copy, but at least there's something about it that means something to you, and you can let that shine through. And your own natural creativity and your own thought process and your other influences that you take in will allow it to become something that's not a copy of somebody else's work. It's your own work that's been influenced by other people. So I think that would be my big tip in improvisation for tabletop gaming, is let those influences come through and use those ideas that other people have used, these tried and true concepts, and use them in your own games, just as I might play a John Coltrane or a Charlie Parker like in my jazz solo. You can use a Lord of the Rings encounter in your tabletop game, and as long as you let it become influenced by your own creativity, nobody's going to know the difference. They'll think it's a wonderful encounter. And kind of moving into the other thing that I've kind of wanted to bring into this, the Legend Lore Challenge, one of the things that I think that's so great about it, other than that it's gotten so many new people involved in the community, is that basically, going back to the jazz analogy for me, just like I might play a John Coltrane lick, Legend Lore is basically like the tabletop gaming version of that. We have just at this point, basically hundreds of these little criteria that people have been putting into their legend lore videos and posts. Use those in your games. Next time you need to come up with a character, think of one of the legend lore criteria that you've seen and use that to make a character or a location or a story. Like, these ideas are always in the back of your mind, whether you kind of realize it or not. And kind of going back to the point that I started with, improvisation is not about creating something new out of nowhere. It's about using the ideas that you have that you didn't plan on using and coming up with a way to use them in the moment. And that's really my biggest tip for improvisation, is to kind of try to frame it in that way. So it's not something to be scared of because you have all this information in you already. So going into it, just try to keep that in mind. It's not about, you don't have to create something brand new. You just want to use the ideas that you know that you have and make something awesome with it. And as long as you have good people around you and it's a good group, you're going to come up with something cool no matter what, because these ideas are great for a reason. So those are my kind of rambling thoughts on improvisation and influences and stealing in RPGs and in music. So hopefully you found some of this information useful. If you did, go ahead and like and subscribe. I'm going to do more of these type of audio responses in the future. Hopefully I can get it a little bit more streamlined and a little bit less rambly going forward, but that's going to be a work in progress. To steal another thing, as Tim from Tabletop Terrace said, it's about improvement, not perfection. So I will be trying to work on how I present my ideas and speak, and this is kind of a practice run for me to do that going forward. Well, thank you anybody who listened. If you have any ideas to add about improvisation, feel free to comment either on the Facebook post or on the YouTube video. I'd be happy to hear and talk about improvisation. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. And thank you everybody for listening. I'll see you next time.